Pacers basketball finally back tonight after a few days off. We're talking about Isaiah Jackson to open today's show and his strong start to the season. He talked to us at practice today and had some interesting stuff to say. I want to highlight his play. Plus, Pacers Heat tonight in Indy. A lot of good players missing for the Heat, but Wes Goldberg from Locked On Heat's going to join us to talk about that game, how the Heat got to where they are in terms of roster building, Victor Oladipo, and much more on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we're talking about two different things. First and foremost, Isaiah Jackson. I want to talk about his start to the season after his big game in Brooklyn on Saturday. Plus, we got to talk to him at practice earlier today, for you listening yesterday at the earliest, which was pretty interesting. I think he's had a nice start to the season despite banging up his knee Monday night in Brooklyn. He should be fine to play tonight against the Heat. And then Wes Goldberg from Lockdown Heat's going to join us to talk about the Heat, how good they are, where the Pacers can exploit them, ex-Pacer Victor Oladipo, and the Heat's roster building, what Pat Riley does well, what the Pacers can emulate on that front. Going to do that with a lot of Locked On hosts and their teams that they cover this season. But I want to start by talking about Isaiah Jackson. Haven't really dove into him much as a segment on this show. I like to do this for every player every so often when I have segments to fill of, highlight them for a segment, talk about what they've been doing well and why it matters for the Pacers. And Isaiah Jackson just had far and away his best game of the season Saturday night in Brooklyn when they won. 18 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists. I thought that was impressive. 2 steals and a block. Not only the best game of his season, one of the best games of his career. Game score, Basketball Reference's little number that they use to track individual performances says that's his best game of the season and the second best game of his career behind his 26-10 game he had against the Clippers last year, which admittedly I forgot about when I said one of the best games of his career, but in the top 3, right? He was awesome in that game. And so I wanted to dive into what he's been doing this year because a lot of the stuff that I talked about with him before the season being important, he's improved, right? Number one, his biggest problem as a rookie, fouls, right? Over 6 fouls per 36 minutes. That's fouling out if you play starter level minutes. This year, down to 5.4 right now, and that includes a rougher start in this department that he has improved on. And it's something, he talks about it all the time last year. He's too jumpy, right? He had the 5-foul game in Philly, and Embiid's going to kick your butt, but he's gotten that down a little more in recent games. Just had none on Monday. He only played 13 minutes, but 0 on Monday. Still something he'll have to improve, but better than last year, right? And that's a big thing for him. He can stay on the floor more, which gives you more time to develop. It's very obvious how that's helpful, especially for a team that's had foul issues. And then the rest of his stats, the stats that involve him touching the ball or being around the play, have all changed in a way that I think is good for his development, right? Rebounding up, right? He can jump really high. He can go get it above guys even when they're bigger than him. That's been impressive. And this is all per minute stats. Per game is not useful because his minutes are up, although his minutes are up because he's been playing better. Either way, rebounding up, done a really good job on the defensive glass, especially. And I think now that he's getting better at staying down and not flying past guys for these blocks, he's in position to get more of them, which is a nice development. And then on offense, his scoring is down, but it's not down because he's scoring worse. He's shooting better from the field, up. His field goal percentage is up. His free throw percentage is about the same. What he's doing instead is he's found a way to turn his touches that he was shooting a lot last year into passes, right? Kalen Cooper highlighted this on a Twitter thread, I forget when, last weekend at some point. He had that 4-assist game in his big night when he was, he threw like a behind-the-back pass in the lane and did a little scoop shuffle to Jalen Smith for a bucket. Like, his passing has been much better this year. He's up to almost 3 assists per 36 minutes. Like, that's pretty good given the volume of touches he has a game, up over an assist per game more than last year. And that's important for him because of what he's good at on offense, because of what his offense allows him to be, right? He is this athletic threat that can, if the ball's up high, he has the best chance to get it of any player on the court, right? He can jump out of the gym and go get it. So when he sets a screen, the defense panics a little bit about the lob being there, right? When he's in there with McConnell, that's there all the time. And so they back up a little bit. So they are resisting him at the rim. And so what happens now is if he catches it one step away from that guy who backed off to stop a lob, he can catch and throw it to someone else. That's been a needed evolution for him in the pick and roll and in general with passing. And some of that is the way he's being defended and he's reacting to it impressively. And some of that is his ability to read the game, because it's not just knowing that you have to pass, it's knowing where the guy is that you'll have to pass to. If you catch and know you have to pass, you have to look around to find the guy. The defense can recover and then the pass isn't there. But he's being able to see, especially in the corners, where that pass needs to go. A needed evolution for his offensive game. So that's why the scoring part being down doesn't mean anything to me, because his field goal percentage is still up. He's still taking and making the right shots, but he's finding the passes, and all of his other stats have gone up in a way that suggests, yeah, he's grown quite significantly in his read of the game. And so at practice today, Scott Agnes was asking a little bit about this stuff. I think he'll have a better story on my explanations now on it, because Chris Duarte's tied in a little bit. But Isaiah was saying he's calmer in games. And that's been really helpful for him in, one, staying down on fouls, but two, being locked into what his job is in the game, what he is supposed to do in his role on a given night, because it changes ever so slightly with your matchup and your game plan and stuff. And so being in year 2 instead of year 1, where you feel like you have to prove yourself, you're new to the league, you don't know anything about anything, right? That's been really helpful for him to be calmer and more relaxed and focused in games. And it's come up a lot talking with him, because this week, right, Duarte had that huge 30-point game Monday. So we talked to Chris Duarte at practice on Wednesday, and Rick Carlisle brought this up first, but like sometimes for guys in year 2, them knowing what to expect from an NBA season can actually cause them to start a little slow, right? They don't have the same eagerness or focus necessarily, not in a negative way. It's just, it can be harder to come out the same way. Tyrese, we asked him about this, right? He also had a slow start to his second season, and he switched roles in the same way Duarte did, where he moved into the Kings starting 5 and really struggles to start his second season, right? Tyrese Halliburton's first game of his second season, he had 2 points. His third game, he had 8 points, right? Like, he could not quite fit in and figure it out. And so it can be hard in your second season when there's more expected of you. You know what you're doing, which honestly is a little bit of negative here, and your role changes to come out and be effective. And yet Isaiah Jackson has done that, which, given that Halliburton and Duarte had the opposite happen to them, is impressive. That calm demeanor he said he's taken on in games is impressive, right? He says it's helping him not be as jumpy. He's not as concerned with his stats, his makes, his misses, his errors, whatever. He just wants to produce and make the right play in his role. And so that comfort, that change in mindset and heart entering a game has been helpful for him. And it's been pretty noticeable to me that, his mistakes, he doesn't shy away from this. Like, if he turns it over in the lane, he's not going to avoid going into the lane on future possessions. He just will keep doing it and try to make the right play the next time. So I think he's done that. He's stepped up, produced, made the right plays, and had that calmer demeanor in games. And so as a result, he's been awesome, both from an individual perspective and a team perspective. Not awesome like change his role, boost his minutes, although I think he could play a few more minutes every game. But let's look at on-off stats. 148 minutes of Isaiah Jackson this season. Pacers net rating plus 5.5. 122.9 offensive rating. That's unsustainable. They've shot ridiculously well from 3 with him out there. That number will drop, but they haven't shot that well from 2 with him out there, right? The defensive rating with Isaiah Jackson, 117.3. That is better. With him off, that goes to 119. And the offensive rating with him off drops to 112. So, he clearly is showing his impact in a way that an 11-point swing. Now, we're talking about very small minute sample sizes, but their defense, especially when he's in there, they do a better job defending from a lot of areas in a way that is pretty sustainable. Right? His impact's been really strong, and that's why they might explore more minutes for him. Offense and defense has been better with him out there. I think that the offense will likely settle in about the same by the season's end, but I think their defensive rating will be better when the season ends with him out there than off. And he provides that vertical spacing element that no one else offers. His screening's better than last year. He's the second best big man passer on the team to me. Maybe you could call him comparable to Goga. I would think Goga's a little better right now. And on defense, right, he can switch. He can guard everybody. He's pretty valuable in a lot of aspects of the game and the way the Pacers are playing this year. That's why his stats look so impressive. So, he's been at 20 minutes per game until Monday when he got hurt mid-game and only ended up playing about 12, which is deflating his minutes per game stats. I think remaining with him around 20 makes a lot of sense as he continues to get more comfortable, grows in chemistry with new teammates. And something I asked him about at practice is specifically TJ McConnell. They have looked really solid together. Like the way that McConnell, who puts pressure on the rim on offense, can have a lob threat, has worked really well for this Pacers team. And I didn't even think that Isaiah would go this way, but I asked him about playing with TJ, and he said, I like the way he's aggressive on defense and how that helps me, right? And together, the defensive rating with both of them out there, 115.7. That's not great, but compared to most Pacer numbers, that's actually pretty good. And it's with ridiculous opponent three-point shooting percentages. Like those two together have been really good on the defensive end of the floor. So that partnership, I think, is something that makes a lot of sense to continue to grow and explore. They fit well together. Jackson is growing, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he continues to get better this season, because there are still ways he can. The foul number is still a little high. He doesn't have a ton of range, but he's clearly better than last year in a way that is really impressive, and I'm excited to watch him continue to grow. And he's become so much more mature and just in 1 year to the next in the NBA. Super impressive start for Isaiah Jackson. Going to keep monitoring his stats as the season goes on. If you have requests for the next player segment highlight, I do these on occasion throughout the season. We talked about TJ McConnell after the Philly game. For those of you who remember, for example, let me know. I'm always happy to talk about other guys, especially when we get to talk to them in practice. But now, let's talk about the Miami Heat, because they're in town tonight. Wes Goldberg from Locked On Heat's going to join us to talk Heat, Pacers, Oladipo, how the Heat rebuilt, what matchups are key in this game, and how the Heat play well on defense. Can the Pacers learn anything from how they sort of grow on that end of the floor? Let's bring Wes in and talk Pacers Heat. Hey guys, one short little break here so I can talk to you about PrizePicks. You can take Luka Doncic to score more than 26.5 points, LeBron to have more than a certain number of rebounds, KD to have less than a certain number of assists. That's how PrizePicks works. Their format is simple, it's easy to play, and it's a ton of fun. How does it work? You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they'll score more or less than their PrizePicks projections in any stats, and you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people, it's just you versus the projections available, which is what I love about it. PrizePicks offers projections of any sport you watch, NBA, NFL, World Series, anything, you name it, they got it. You can make your picks in 60 seconds or less. Super easy. It's safe, it's fast withdrawals, and it's operational in over 30 states plus Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant match deposit up to $100 with the promo code LOCKDOWN. You put in 100, they'll give you 100. You put in 50, they'll give you 50. You get the idea, but you got to use the promo code LOCKDOWN to sign up for that instant deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. Thanks, everybody, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen every day. How about for your second listen, Locked On Heat? Because one of the co-hosts of Locked On Heat is now here to join us to talk about the Miami Heat ahead of a very fascinating game coming up on Friday. Unfortunately, no more TJ Warren versus Jimmy Butler storylines to track, but Wes Goldberg, host of Locked On Heat, covering that team for the third season now since coming over from Warriors land, here to talk Heat Pacers. Wes, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Second season
Okay.
back.
I don't know why I thought it was longer.
No, I mean I've been covering them for a really long time and took a little hiatus to cover the Golden State Warriors and a little bit of a championship run there, and then some down years, and then came back to Miami.
The Heat are weird to me, Wes. They lost to the Kings. They beat the Warriors and then lost to the Warriors. They beat the Raptors and then lost to the Raptors. I do not really get the Heat. They look fine when I watch them play, and they're 3-5 right now. They might be 3-6 by the time this is out. They might be 4-5. What's going on with this team? Why aren't they a little bit better?
It's a great question, and it's one that we've been asking on our show a lot, because you look at the characters, and it's a lot of the same guys that were there for the Eastern Conference Finals run last year. The only major subtraction is PJ Tucker, and we all knew that PJ Tucker was going to be a big loss. I don't think anybody anticipated it to be this much of a loss. And I don't mean to say that they're out to a stumbling start because they don't have PJ Tucker, but he was a connective glue to those lineups last year. Moreover, they just didn't replace him with a real power forward. And you could see that they, in not having a true power forward on the roster, they did try to shift their identity a little bit. They're also including Tyler Hero in that starting lineup. So they wanted to go a little bit more offensive first, or I guess the Heat will never be offense first. It's always going to be defense first for them. But they wanted to prioritize offense a little bit more, get up to maybe around the top 10 in offense while still maintaining a top 10 defense. They were 5th in defense last year. But that in trying to figure out a way to nudge up the offense, the defense slipped. And some of those little things that the Miami Heat are accustomed to doing, paying attention to details, playing really hard on that end, that stuff just kind of went by the wayside. And so I think what this team needed, and they had a big practice on Monday. It was their first practice of the regular season, right before that big win against the Warriors on Tuesday night in Miami. They just went back to basics, right? They went back, they pulled out the acoustic guitar and they said, "This is who we are. This is what we're gonna be. Let's not get too weird about it." And then the defense stepped up, and then what did you know? They ended up taking 42 threes. They made 16 of them against the Golden State Warriors, and they had one of the best offensive performances of the season. So I just think there was a little bit of an identity crisis with this team, trying to figure out how they were going to win games, and it turns out they were just going to win games the same way they were going to win last year. Even if the personnel is a little bit different, the starting lineup and the lineups thereafter are a little bit different.
Yeah, I get that there's no PJ Tucker anymore, and there's a couple defenders, I would say, in the Heat's top 9. Seeing them 19th in defense is like, what? An Eric Spoelstra team that far down. Jimmy Butler and Bam still exist. Like it's so stunning to me to see that part of the Heat season. I think they'll get to the top 10. They have all those things I just said, but that's what's been surprising in my limited Heat watching, and what I was interested to see in this Pacers game, because the Pacers defense, this is a good yin and yang battle. The Pacers defense is awful. It might be the worst defense in the league, currently 27th in defensive rating. Their offense is awesome. They could certainly score, 7th, I believe, right now in offensive rating. Halliburton can't be stopped by anything. He can see the whole floor. So what would win out, the stronger Heat defense or the surprisingly spunky Pacer offense? But it looks like the Heat are, just be Golden State, are going to be the team that has the edge there. But what stands out to you about this specific matchup? Because that kind of battle can sometimes lead to funky games.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Miami is leaning on now is the 2-3 zone. They used it in the fourth quarter against the Warriors, limited the Warriors to just 15 points in a quarter, which is a thing that doesn't happen against the Golden State Warriors. They don't score 15 points in a quarter, but they did it in the most important one on Tuesday. And so I think that's going to be a big thing that the Heat just use going forward, regardless of matchup. They'll probably use it against the Indiana Pacers, right? Like they like to shoot threes, the Pacers do. And so I could see maybe that being the way that they try to bust that zone. But the Heat are going to try to take away points in the paint at all costs. That's what they do. They want to limit attempts at the basket first and foremost. That's been the formula for them basically since the bubble year, is just taking away points in the paint. But the Pacers aren't awesome at getting into the paint, right? And so I do think that maybe that won't affect them as much. So I think it's going to be basically Indiana's shooting versus Miami's zone defense for a big chunk of that game.
Pacers have been shooting well. When Buddy Hield's on fire, it lasts some length of time that's long. If it lasts through Friday, that could bode poorly for the Heat, but it also could end at any moment, as it has throughout basically his entire career. That zone would be an interesting strategy, because the Pacers have tried to drive a lot, and that's what Tyrese Halliburton has really done better this year. Is he's always been this master reader of the game and passer, but getting to the 10 has not been his thing. He's gotten better at that this year, balancing that aggression and his passing in a way that helps manipulate the defense. Ben Matherin's been good at attacks as well, but they haven't seen a lot of zone. I think that could be a good way, especially for a young team that already has to, be like, oh crap, how do we adjust? Let's call our coach. That will be tough for them in a mid-game setting. And the Heat always seem to have an answer for the Pacers. I mean, even when the Pacers were good, they had that playoff series, obviously, where the Heat just destroyed them. Like they've always done well against whatever the Pacers have thrown at them. Speaking of the Heat-Pacer connection, Wes, I think he's still on the Heat, but I haven't seen him this year. I believe he did not travel on the Heat's recent road trip. What's up with Vic? Is he going to play? Is Oladipo still alive? I know he's alive. I'm joking about that. But is there a chance he plays in this game? He hasn't played in Indiana since being traded away 2 seasons ago now. I know he's still dealing with the knee stuff, but I'm looking forward to seeing him. What's the latest on that?
Still dealing with this knee tendinosis. It's not in the surgically repaired knee.
Different from tendinitis.
Different than tendinitis. Tendinosis is more of like a pain and a stiffness in the knee. And so that's what he's dealing with, opposite the knee that he got all the surgeries on.
Oh, okay.
And that's the way it was explained to me was, look, when you're repairing one knee and you're working a lot on one knee, you can tend to overcompensate on the other side of your body, and that might be a little bit of what's happening here. They downplayed this basically since the preseason, and he still hasn't played, and it's been 8 games. And I am not getting any indication that Victor Oladipo is going to be playing anytime soon. I don't know when he's going to play. I don't know necessarily what the severity of the injury is. I don't know if you asked Victor Oladipo if he would want to play right now, given the pain and the stiffness in that knee, or if it's Miami just sort of holding him out and being careful. The Heat team are not they're not one to really reveal much when it comes to medicals, and they haven't with Victor Oladipo for the last 3 years, including right now. So in terms of whether or not he's going to play Friday night, I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine. But I would probably, if I had to bet $1 on it, I would probably say no.
Yeah, they played tonight. The night we're speaking on a back to back. He didn't play the night before. He didn't go on this Heat road trip that happened, short road trip, but the road trip that happened last week. And then they have a travel day, and then the Pacers, and then a 1 game in 5 day stretch. It seems like they would just be like, okay, if we're playing 2 times the next week, let's just wait that out. But
Right.
especially with only one travel day, so I'm with you. Just intuitively, it seems like he wouldn't play, but I don't think he's been in the stadium since being traded. In terms of how the timing has worked with injuries and surgeries for him, I'd be curious if he would just come to just be there and be in the
Mhm.
crowd and see what the reception would be, even if he's not going to play. But mostly, I'm just curious when that's going to happen, because that's going to be a story that I would like to write, and I've not even gotten close to the chance to do anything of the sorts in the time since the trade. Last thing, generally on the Heat, before I ask you about rebuilds and Pat Riley, because the Pacers need to learn more about rebuilds. It's their first time doing it in forever. The Heat, we talked about this at the beginning, always good on defense, right? That is their thing. They're getting back to it to try to recover this year, and they have talented defenders. Obviously, Jimmy Butler, Bam, and PJ Tucker last year. When you think about defense and what the Heat do, you just talked about them keeping it simple. What did it take for Miami to grow on the defensive end as they kind of went from era to era? Because looking at how they've been on defense historically, like they've always been above average, even when they were winning, in the games in the 30s. So there's something to the way Spo does this and the guys on the team, that he's still a good defensive coach. What do they do well there? And is anything emulatable? That's not a word. Anything possible to emulate for a team like the Pacers, who have a bunch of young guys who have never played together and can't keep anyone in front of them, that they could, lean on and say, okay, let's do this like Miami to improve on D.
I think it's a couple things. Number one, you look at Heat history, and they've always kind of had a tone setter defensively, right? We could go back. Let's just start with Alonzo Mourning, for instance, right? Defensive Player of the Year, comes over from Charlotte in that big trade, and he immediately just raises Miami's defensive just prowess, the talent level on that end of the court, and everybody just follows suit. And that was back in the '90s, when basically if you had a great center, you were just a good defensive team. And that's what happened, right? And you could surround him with Tim Hardaway and these other guys who couldn't play any defense, and it didn't matter. But he was the tone setter on that end. You kind of fast forward a little bit, a few more years, Udonis Haslem comes in. Other players, Brian Grant comes over from Portland in the early 2000s, right before they draft Dwayne Wade. These guys are other defensive tone setters, just players that other guys in that locker room can follow their lead on, saying, "Hey, look, defense is important to us. And if I'm gonna play defense, you're gonna play defense." And you just keep going on through the years, and they've always just had a guy. And for the last 20 years, by the way, it's been Udonis Haslem. And you can kind of look at this most recent iteration and just see, hey, even the big three era. Like, I know that everybody talks about LeBron, D Wade, and Chris Bosh as offensive guys, but those guys really cared about defense in a way that the Brooklyn Nets just can't relate. And in that superstar kind of configuration. And then the most recent iteration with Bam Adebayo, who just desperately, more than anything, wants to be Defensive Player of the Year. He clearly cares about that end. So does a guy like Jimmy Butler. He takes pride in being a two-way threat, and all these other guys. And it just sort of seeps into the whole organizational outlook, the whole, I hate to use the word, but I'm going to do it anyway, the culture of the team. And so that's part of it. And I can even tell you from my time covering the Golden State Warriors, it was similar with Draymond Green. He sets the tone defensively. Without him, I don't know that team cares as much defensively over this last decade as they had. And so I do think it starts with a special player, a guy who really is, number one, talented defensively, but is willing to also set the tone and hold other guys accountable. And then you obviously need a coach who can scheme stuff. I don't know that there's a better defensive coach in the league than Eric Spoelstra. Not just like we talked about the zone. He uses all different kinds of zones. He uses all different kinds of man coverage. The team is so well coached that based on whoever they have at center, whether it's Bam Adebayo, Dwayne Dedman, Omer Yurtseven, PJ Tucker last year, like they can shift through all different kinds of defenses, which whether it's blitz and help, drop coverage, switch everything. Like the team just drills defense so much, probably more than a lot of other teams do, so that they can toggle in between different looks, and then that throws off opposing offenses too. So it starts with the player, I think, and then you kind of go to the coaching staff just scheming the right X's and O's.
Yeah, Carlisle himself, like with Detroit, with some of the later Dirk teams, has been the defensive coach. But I think the tone setting from the star thing is really where the Pacers like. I just heard on the Low Post, Zach Lowe is talking with I can't remember who now, which is embarrassing, but like the Bucks, they have Giannis, and Giannis busts his butt every defensive possession. It's like if you're anyone else on the team, if Giannis is doing it, okay, I'll do it. You know what I mean? Like he sets that tone for that team. And so not to take this isn't a shot at Tyrese Halliburton. He's just not a good defender. It's not that he's not trying. He's just not a good defender right now, right? So it can be hard for that to kind of instill in everybody without a one dude. And so, yes, the Pacers lack talent. Adding someone like that would be helpful, but also having a trendsetter leader on that end of the floor would kind of seep it in to everybody. One more break here, guys, before we talk about Miami Heat and rebuilding. So I can tell you about Acre Pro when it comes to land sales. It pays to have experts in your corner, and Acre Pro Midwest Farm Group are your local farmland specialists. With decades of experience in Indiana agriculture, no one knows the market better. Whether you're doing a 1031 exchange, expanding your operation, selling a row crop farm, your local Acre Pro agent will walk the land with you and ensure a deal gets done right. Great service is just the beginning. Acre Pro provides unparalleled land data, including soil ratings, elevation, flood zones, and land valuation across parcels so that you get the full picture up front and can be confident in the entire land market. Your agent will cater to each of your individual needs and help you navigate the complexities of buying and selling land so the process is made simple. Experience the ease of Acre Pro by working with farmland specialists like Kyle Rule, Brady Hammond, Neil Herr, and Kyle Spray. And visit acrepro.com or call 765-587-3185 to talk to your local land expert today. That's acrepro.com or 765-587-3185. Thanks everybody again for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, LOST, for the latest around the sporting world with local experts on the biggest teams in every market, something only the Locked On Podcast Network can do, as Wes can attest as he hosts Locked On Heat, covering that Miami team every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The Pacers are doing something they have never done since I was born before Wes right now. They're rebuilding. Not their favorite word to say. They say build. Instead, they are building, which makes sense, I suppose. They are entering a new era. They said that on Media Day. Doesn't take a genius to go, okay, you have 13 players younger than 25. You're building. They haven't done that in a while. They've always tried to get incrementally better than the year before. Or Paul George falls into their laps and is awesome. And Victor Oladipo turns out, wow, he's way better than he was in the other teams. Like, they haven't had to since Reggie Miller was drafted. And now they have to. They finally have to pivot this direction. And so something I've been doing is asking people who cover other teams who, the Heat didn't ever strip it down. I think the lowest wins they had was like 37 or something between Braun and now. But teams that went through a shift, what did they do well to get back to relevancy? I did this with the Grizzlies last year, the Nets last week, and now it's you with the Heat. So first, a big picture. And this could be something that any team did.
Wait, I'm sorry. You did this with the Nets, and what did they have to say?
Well,
hand the keys to Kyrie Irving and Kevin
no.
Durant.
I mean,
like
fine. When they post.
No, I know what you mean. I know.
Yes, it sounds ridiculous.
I know.
Speaking of Zach Law, I was listening to him and Nick Friedell's podcast from earlier today. Aren't you glad we don't have to talk about the Nets right now, Wes?
Yes. Let's not do it. I'm sorry I brought it up.
That's okay. The Heat, obviously, something they did well. I'll actually say it later. We'll talk about this. Is they did a really good job identifying like fringe talent guys that were actually really good. But from your seat, seeing what they did post LeBron when they had all these really scrappy, Josh Richardson, James Johnson, Kelly Olynyk teams doing well, what did they do well post LeBron, pre Jimmy to go from one era to the next and stay good and relevant?
Well, post LeBron, pre Jimmy was a tough time for the Miami Heat, and that was to me when they needed to figure out what it was that their identity was going to be. And I think that's such a big part of a rebuild. When you're rebuilding, what are you building towards? What is it that you want to look like? What kind of team do you want to be? What kind of culture do you want to have in place? How is it that you want to acquire players and acquire talent? And the Miami Heat, under Pat Riley, ever since he got here, have always looked to try to acquire stars. And that was the case when LeBron left. Like, they didn't want LeBron to leave. They didn't expect necessarily for LeBron to leave. And they were trying to rebuild that team around LeBron. LeBron leaves for Cleveland, and they kind of have to reboot things. They basically go half a season and trade 2 first-round picks for Goran Dragic, who was coming off of an All-NBA team two years before that, to pair with Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. And so that didn't work out. Goran Dragic and Chris Bosh never played together because Chris Bosh got the blood clots, and that was really tough. And then that basically just sent the organization into a spiral that basically lasted 2-3 years. To me, what I think they did was you just start using your draft picks, accumulating talent, trying to find guys through that process that just fit the team's just organizational culture. And I'm saying culture with a lowercase c, not an uppercase c. Because
Twice now, twice.
every franchise in the league has an organizational culture. It doesn't have to be a strong culture. It could be a weak culture. It could be, but it is whatever that culture in that little environment ecosystem that they are creating exists. It exists in every single franchise. And determining what that is, what you want it to be, and finding players who meet that is very important. I'll even lump in the Warriors with this too. For the 2 years that they were bad and missed the playoffs in between, championship runs, they kind of had to do the same thing. They had to just go find new guys who just sort of fit. They want guys who move the ball and can play with elite feel, so that they can play next to Steph and Draymond and Clay. And the Miami Heat, they just wanted tough MFers, right? They just wanted tough dudes who felt like they had something to prove. And then that's what they do. That's what the Miami Heat want. And defensive first guys, like we were talking about before, and versatility. They really prioritize versatility and that kind of thing. And eventually you just churn through guys, right? For every Dion Waiters, there's a Max Strus. For every James Johnson, there's a Duncan Robinson. Like you're going through guys, and then it just kind of comes down to coaching. And this is the part that I think got lost in like the early process, 76ers and some of the other rebuilds that go on, is you kind of just hire a coach who's just sort of a placeholder while the team is sort of building towards something until you get all the talent you want. But the coaching part of it is so important. It's just coaching the team that you want. It's kind of like dressing for the job that you want to have. Sometimes you have to just coach the team that you want to have. And it sounds simple, but really good coaching kind of helps that rebuild. And I think that's, if I'm the Indiana Pacers, what I'm looking at is, all right, let's just go find guys, Tyrese Halliburton and other guys who make sense for what we're trying to do, and then coach them up and just try to turn this team into what we want it to be.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Obviously, you know better than me. I agree with all that, looking back at what they did. And the tough MFers part was so interesting because, like, I always joke about the Heat and the Raptors that, they could put you and I in a uniform and turn us into serviceable rotation players. Like, it's like they find the mentality of a guy they want and they make him good. And like, a lot of them go somewhere else and they're worse. James Johnson's on the Pacers right now. He wasn't awesome for the Heat, but he was way better there than he was anywhere else, right? Tyler Johnson, remember him?
Yeah.
He got what, $50 million because of a couple of years with the Heat. Rodney McGruder was a dude I thought was like should be on a contender, like as a 3-and-D wing. He was never any good after the Heat. Like, they were really good at turning mentality into success. And the other thing they did well, talking about those three names, although James Johnson was already somebody. This is something, when I talked to the Locked On Nets guys, they did pretty well too with like Spencer Dinwiddie,
right,
for example, and a bunch of other guys, like finding these fringe guys and turning them into success stories, like McGruder, like Hassan Whiteside, right, from the G League. Did he ever make an All-Star game actually with
Whiteside? No,
I thought he did for some reason, but turning him into a very good $100 million player, like that is also a key part of the rebuild, and that's the part that I think, especially when you have low resources, because in the Nets case, make one of the worst trades ever. In the Heat case, you give up 2 firsts for Dragic at an unfortunate time. You have to be able to get assets without, using the draft. And the Heat did a very good job of finding those kind of guys.
Yeah, look,
they still do that. Gabe Vincent, Max Strus. Yeah.
I think a big part of it is once you kind of know what you want to do and know the players that you're building around, you're just trying to find players who complement those other guys, right? And so the Miami Heat's case, they're trying to build around Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero now after signing to the extension. That's pretty clear. Well, what do you want to put specifically around Jimmy and Bam? You're trying to just surround them with what? You're trying to surround them with shooting. And you look at all the guys that the Heat found, like off the scrap heap, these undrafted guys that they keep talking about, they're shooters. It's Duncan Robinson. It's Max Strus. It's Caleb Martin, who's a 41% three-point shooter now. They find guys who they believe can complement the core pieces, the core building blocks that they already have in place. So it's not so much as just saying, all right, we just need to go find talent. Let's just go pick up guys and hope that they're good. This is our core group. This is the kind of identity we want to have. Who are the guys who fit that? And for Miami, it's not just the fact I think that they are attracted to these guys being undrafted because they did not have draft picks, so that was sort of their only option. But I think they also like the guys that were undrafted and had the chip on their shoulder and wanted something to prove. By the way, it really helps that Udonis Haslem was that guy and has been there for 20 years and has won championships and could say, hey, if you come here, you could have a career like I had, right? And so that's probably not true, but at least that's a selling point to these guys. And it's not just a selling point for them to sign, but probably. But like a reason to believe, a reason to put the work in every single day, even when things might not be looking on the up and up. And so you want for the Heat, they wanted to find guys who had that chip on their shoulder, who also complemented the core pieces that they already had in place. And then for the Indiana Pacers, I would say, like, look, I think Mathurin's awesome. Halliburton's awesome. Boom. Backcourt of the future. Congrats, Pacers fans. You figured it out. At least it looks like it early on. What do you need around those guys? You need defenders, right? You need guys to make their life a little bit easier. And so if you're the Pacers and you're looking at trying to find other guys, I think you're looking for versatility and defense and guys who can do a lot of things on that end and make up for what it is that Halliburton and Mathurin can't do.
You're hired by the team. That's exactly what they said. They're looking for athleticism, especially defensive athleticism and shooting, right? And now it's harder than it used to be to find the shooters because there's like a million stat things that teams use to find these good shooters. But athleticism and defensive athleticism, to the extent that those guys are just on the scrap heap, yeah, they could find that a little easier. Like that's something they liked about Aaron Nesmith, who has been surprisingly useful for this team, right? Like that was a big piece to get in the Brogdon trade. So that's what I think they'll do. Like to your point about the Heat saying, yes, if you're a shooter, let's try to make you good. And we have all this lower KC culture stuff that can help. The Pacers need to find that sort of guy, those athletic-ish defenders that are just out there for some reason that they can try to develop into a rotation player for them. Because like I said earlier, their defense kind of stinks. So the Heat, who may be looking for a get-right offensive game, Tyler Hero might be looking for a get-right offensive game. Friday might be a good time for that game to happen. Listeners, if you're this far in the show, thank you. Wes, tell everybody where they can find the latest on the Miami Heat.
Sure. Twitter at WC Goldberg. You can follow the Locked On Heat account on Twitter and on Instagram at Locked On Heat, on YouTube, Odyssey, your favorite podcasting app. That's where it is.
You will know you found Wes on Twitter because he currently has the check mark. We'll see how much longer any of us.
I'm not paying for that, man.
I'm not paying for that. I've made that joke on 2 podcasts in a row now. What a ridiculous idea. I cannot believe it. Well, all these zero people that impersonated me will now be much more able to do so going forward, right? Yeah. Totally ridiculous. I'm on Twitter at TEastNBA. This podcast, of course, at Locked On Pacers, free and available wherever you get podcasts, including where Locked On Heat is, and YouTube, where you can see our lovely faces, including me sitting in the sun right behind me. Thank you for these photo frames, for blocking it. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll be breaking down this game on our respective shows come Monday. Till then, Wes won't actually because he's getting married. But either way, everybody, take care.